My husband abandoned me and our 2-year-old son after his ex-wife showed up claiming the baby wasn't his, so I got a DNA test, and when the results came back, I made sure everyone who believed her lies paid the price. I need to get this out somewhere because my entire world just got turned upside down, and I'm still trying to process what happened and how the person I trusted most in this world could abandon me and our son based on the word of his manipulative ex-wife who has been trying to destroy our marriage since day one. My husband Jake and I have been together for 5 years, married for 3, and we have a beautiful 2-year-old son named Oliver who is literally the light of both our lives, or at least I thought he was the light of Jake's life too until last week when everything fell apart in the most devastating way possible. Let me back up and give you some context because this situation is so messed up that you need the full picture to understand how we got here. Jake was married before to this woman named Melissa, and they have a 6-year-old daughter together named Emma who Jake sees every other weekend and one night during the week. Melissa has made my life hell since the day Jake and I started dating. Melissa is one of those women who can't stand that her ex-husband moved on and found happiness with someone else, and she spent the last 5 years trying to sabotage our relationship in every way possible. Like calling Jake at all hours with fake emergencies involving Emma, showing up at our house unannounced claiming she needed to discuss something urgent about their daughter, and making snide comments about me whenever I'm around during pickup and drop-off. I try to be understanding because I know co-parenting is complicated and I didn't want to be the evil stepmother who caused problems between Jake and his daughter. But Melissa made it clear from the beginning that she viewed me as a threat and would do whatever it took to get rid of me. When Jake and I got engaged, Melissa ramped up her crazy behavior and started telling Emma that I was trying to replace her mother and that her daddy didn't love her anymore because he was starting a new family. Poor Emma would come to our house confused and upset, asking if her daddy still loved her and if I was going to make him forget about her. It broke my heart because I would never try to come between Jake and his daughter, and I went out of my way to make Emma feel welcome and loved in our home. But Melissa kept poisoning her against me, and Jake was caught in the middle trying to reassure his daughter while dealing with his psycho ex-wife. Things got even worse when I got pregnant with Oliver because Melissa completely lost her mind and started spreading rumors that I had trapped Jake with a pregnancy and that he didn't really want another child and that I was ruining Emma's life by taking her father's attention away from her. Throughout my entire pregnancy, Melissa would call Jake and cry about how Emma was devastated that she was getting a baby brother, how this was going to traumatize their daughter. Jake would come home stressed and worried, and I started to feel like I was somehow doing something wrong by having his baby. When Oliver was born, Jake seemed over the moon and he was such an amazing father right from the start. I thought maybe now that the baby was here and Melissa could see how happy Jake was, she would back off and accept that we were a family. But I was so wrong. If anything, Melissa got worse after Oliver was born, and she started making comments about how the baby didn't look like Jake and how it was suspicious that I had gotten pregnant so quickly after we started trying. She would say these things in front of Emma, who would then repeat them to Jake. I started noticing that Jake was looking at Oliver differently and he seemed distant and distracted. When I asked him about it, he said he was just tired from work and adjusting to having a newborn, but I could tell something was bothering him. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago when Melissa asked Jake to meet her for coffee to discuss Emma's school schedule. Apparently, she spent the entire time planting seeds of doubt about Oliver's paternity and telling Jake that she had always suspected I was cheating and that he needed to get a DNA test before he wasted any more time raising another man's child. I found out about this conversation when Jake came home that night and confronted me about whether I had ever been unfaithful. I was so shocked and hurt that he would even ask me the question because I have never so much as looked at another man since we've been together. I told Jake that I was insulted and devastated that he would question Oliver's paternity based on the word of his bitter ex-wife who has been trying to destroy our marriage for years. I reminded him that Oliver looks exactly like him and has all his mannerisms and expressions. But Jake said that Melissa had pointed out things about Oliver's appearance that he hadn't noticed before and that maybe we should just get a DNA test to put the matter to rest. I lost it because getting a DNA test would be admitting that there was reason to doubt, and there wasn't. We had the biggest fight of our marriage and I told Jake that if he really believed I was capable of cheating on him and lying about our son's father, then maybe he didn't know me at all and maybe we shouldn't be married. Jake got defensive and said he didn't think I was cheating, but that Melissa had made some valid points and that a DNA test would prove Oliver was his and then we could move forward without any doubts. I said if you need a DNA test to know that your son is your son, then you're not the man I thought I married. The fight went on for hours and finally Jake said he needed some time to think. He packed a bag and went to stay at his friend's house, and I was left alone with Oliver wondering how my marriage had fallen apart so quickly. For the next week, Jake barely contacted me except to check on Oliver, and when he did come by to see the baby, he was cold and distant and treated me like I was some kind of stranger. It was clear that Melissa's poison had worked and she had successfully planted enough doubt in his mind to destroy our family. Then last Friday, Jake called and said he wanted to come over to talk. I thought maybe he had come to his senses and realized how ridiculous this whole situation was, but instead he told me that he had been doing a lot of thinking and that he couldn't get past his doubts about Oliver's paternity and that he thought we should separate until we could get a DNA test done. I was devastated because Jake was essentially telling me that he believed his manipulative ex-wife over his own wife and that he was willing to abandon his family based on her lies. I told him that if he walked out that door, he shouldn't bother coming back. Jake said he was sorry but that he needed to know the truth, and that if Oliver was his son, then we could work things out, but until then he couldn't pretend everything was normal. He packed more of his things and left. I spent the weekend crying and trying to figure out how this had happened and how Jake could throw away everything we had built together because his ex-wife had gotten inside his head. I realized that Melissa had finally won and had succeeded in destroying our marriage. But then I got angry because I knew I had done nothing wrong and I wasn't going to let Melissa destroy my family with her lies. So I decided to get the DNA test myself and prove once and for all that Oliver was Jake's son and make everyone who had doubted me eat their words. I made an appointment at a lab and had Oliver tested. Jake agreed to provide a sample and we had to wait 2 weeks for the results. Those were the longest 2 weeks of my life because my entire future depended on what those results would say. During those 2 weeks, Jake's family started treating me differently because apparently he had told them about the paternity questions. Some of them seemed to think that where there's smoke there's fire and that maybe Melissa was right to be suspicious. Jake's mother, who had always been sweet to me, suddenly became cold and formal. His sister made some comment about how she always thought it was weird that I got pregnant so quickly. His father said something about hoping everything would work out for the best, which was basically code for hoping Oliver wasn't actually Jake's son. I felt so alone and betrayed because these people who had welcomed me into their family were now looking at me like I was some kind of cheater who had tricked their son into raising another man's child. The worst part was that Jake was letting them treat me this way. Oliver was too young to understand what was happening, but I could tell he missed his daddy. He would look around for Jake and babble dada, and it broke my heart because Jake was missing out on precious time with his son because he chose to believe lies over the evidence of his own eyes. Finally, the day came when the results were ready. I picked them up from the lab with shaking hands, and when I opened the envelope and read that Jake was indeed Oliver's father with 99.99% certainty, I felt this mixture of relief and rage because I had been right all along and everyone who had doubted me had been wrong. I immediately called Jake and told him the results were in and he needed to come over right away. When he arrived, I handed him the papers without saying a word and watched his face as he read them and saw the confirmation that Oliver was definitely his son. Jake's face went white and then red, and he started crying and apologizing and saying he was sorry for doubting me and that he had made a terrible mistake and that he wanted to come home and be a family again. But I looked at this man who had abandoned his wife and child based on the word of his bitter ex-wife, and I realized that I didn't know who he was anymore. I told him that proving Oliver was his son didn't undo the damage he had caused by choosing to believe Melissa over me. I told Jake that he had shown me exactly who he was when things got difficult and that he had proven that his loyalty was not to his wife and son but to keeping peace with his ex-wife. I said I couldn't trust him anymore. Jake begged me to forgive him and said that Melissa had been very convincing and that she had pointed out things about Oliver that had made him doubt. I said that was exactly the problem because a real father doesn't need someone else to convince him that his child isn't his. I told Jake that he had missed 2 weeks of his son's life because he chose to believe lies and that those were 2 weeks he could never get back. Oliver deserved a father who would never doubt him or abandon him no matter what anyone else said. Jake kept apologizing and promising that he would never doubt me again and that he had learned his lesson. But I told him that some mistakes can't be undone and that walking out on your family because your ex-wife plants seeds of doubt is one of those mistakes. I made copies of the DNA test results and I sent them to everyone who had doubted me, including Jake's family. I included a letter explaining that while the test proved Oliver was Jake's son, it also proved that they had all been willing to believe the worst about me without any evidence. I told Jake's mother that her cold treatment of me during the 2 weeks we were waiting for results had shown me her true character and that I would remember how quickly she turned on me when things got difficult. I sent a copy to Jake's sister along with a reminder of her comment about how suspicious it was that I had gotten pregnant quickly. I told her that her willingness to believe I was a cheater based on nothing but Melissa's lies had damaged our relationship permanently. I also made sure that everyone in Jake's family and friends circle knew exactly what Melissa had done and how she had manipulated Jake into abandoning his family. I wanted them all to see what kind of person she really was. The response was immediate and dramatic because suddenly everyone was apologizing and saying they had never really doubted me and that they had just been concerned and wanted to support Jake through a difficult time. But I wasn't buying their backtracking because they had shown their true colors when they thought I might be guilty, and you can't unring that bell. Jake has been begging me to let him come home and promising that he will never let Melissa manipulate him again and that he will cut contact with her except for matters directly related to Emma. But I told him it was too late for promises. I filed for divorce 2 days ago because I realized that I can't be married to someone who would abandon his family based on the lies of a bitter ex-wife and who would put his child through the trauma of losing his father because he was too weak to stand up to manipulation. Jake is devastated and his family is begging me to reconsider and saying that everyone makes mistakes and that Jake has learned his lesson. But I keep thinking about those 2 weeks when I was alone with Oliver, wondering if my husband would ever come home, and I know I can't live with that kind of uncertainty. The irony is that Melissa got exactly what she wanted because even though the DNA test proved she was lying, she still succeeded in destroying my marriage and breaking up Jake's new family. But I've decided that I'm not going to let her win completely because I'm going to make sure that everyone knows exactly what she did and how her lies destroyed an innocent family. I'm going to make sure that Jake's future relationships know what kind of person his ex-wife is. I've also decided to pursue full custody of Oliver because Jake proved that he's not capable of protecting his son from Melissa's manipulation, and I don't want Oliver to grow up thinking that his father's love is conditional on what other people say about him. The hardest part is that I still love Jake and I know he loves Oliver and me, but love isn't enough when someone shows you that they'll abandon you the moment things get difficult. I can't risk Oliver going through this again when Melissa decides to create more drama. Jake keeps saying that he was confused and manipulated and that he's sorry, but sorry doesn't fix the damage that was done. It doesn't change the fact that when he had to choose between believing his wife or his manipulative ex-wife, he chose the ex-wife. I know some people think I'm being too harsh and that I should give Jake another chance, but I keep thinking about how easily he walked away from us and how he was prepared to let Oliver grow up without a father because Melissa planted some doubts in his head. A real partner doesn't abandon ship the moment someone starts spreading lies, and a real father doesn't need a DNA test to know that his child is his child. Jake failed both tests spectacularly. So now I'm a single mother starting over, but at least I know that Oliver and I are better off without someone who could be so easily manipulated into betraying his own family. I'm going to make sure that everyone knows exactly why our marriage ended and whose lies caused it all. The DNA test proved that Oliver is Jake's son, but it also proved that Jake is not the man I thought I married. Sometimes the truth hurts more than the lies ever could have. Update 1. I posted this story a few weeks ago about how my husband Jake abandoned me and our son Oliver after his ex-wife Melissa convinced him that Oliver wasn't actually his child, and how even after a DNA test proved she was lying, I still filed for divorce because I couldn't forgive him for choosing to believe her over me. Well, things have gotten even more complicated since then, and I'm honestly not sure whether to laugh or cry at how this whole situation has continued to spiral completely out of control. So after I filed for divorce and made it clear that I wasn't taking Jake back no matter how much he apologized, Melissa apparently realized that her plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of getting Jake back, she had actually destroyed his new family and pushed him further away from her. Jake has been completely devastated since I kicked him out. According to his friends, he's been a mess and barely functional, and he's been telling everyone who will listen that he made the biggest mistake of his life and that he would do anything to get Oliver and me back. But here's where it gets really twisted, because instead of being happy that she had successfully destroyed our marriage, Melissa started getting worried that Jake's depression and regret would eventually lead him back to me. She decided she needed to do more damage control. 2 weeks ago, Jake's friend Tom called me and said he needed to tell me something important about what had been happening behind the scenes. What he told me made my blood run cold. Apparently, Melissa had been planning this paternity scam for months, and it wasn't some spontaneous idea that came to her during that coffee meeting with Jake like I originally thought. Tom said that Melissa had been asking questions about Oliver's birth date and doing calculations about when he would have been conceived. She had even driven by our house several times to try to get pictures of Oliver to analyze his appearance. She had also been reaching out to Jake's family members individually to plant seeds of doubt about whether Oliver looked like Jake. She had been very careful to make it seem like she was just making innocent observations rather than deliberately undermining our marriage. The most disturbing part was that Melissa had apparently been researching how to convince someone to get a DNA test. She had found articles about signs of infidelity and how to spot when a child might not belong to their supposed father, and she had used that information to manipulate Jake. Tom said he had known about some of this at the time, but he hadn't realized how calculated and deliberate it was until after everything fell apart. He felt guilty for not warning Jake that he was being manipulated. I thanked Tom for telling me the truth, but honestly it just made me angrier because it confirmed that Jake had been the victim of a months-long psychological manipulation campaign, and he had still chosen to believe Melissa over me. But then Tom told me something else that changed everything and explained why Melissa was so desperate to break up our marriage. According to Tom, Melissa had been telling people that she was hoping Jake would leave me and come back to her. She had never gotten over their divorce and had been trying to win him back ever since. She had apparently been under the delusion that Jake only married me because he was rebounding from their divorce and that deep down he still loved her and wanted their family back together. Tom said that Melissa had been planning to swoop in and comfort Jake after our marriage fell apart and convince him that they should give their relationship another try for Emma's sake. But instead of running to Melissa for comfort, Jake had been spending all his time trying to win me back and begging me to forgive him. It was becoming clear to Melissa that her plan had completely backfired. So last week, Melissa made her most desperate move yet and showed up at Jake's apartment to confess that she had lied about suspecting that Oliver wasn't his child and that she had made the whole thing up because she was jealous and wanted him back. Jake called me immediately after this conversation, and he was absolutely furious. He said that Melissa had admitted to deliberately sabotaging our marriage with lies and that she had been planning it for months. He said that Melissa had actually broken down crying and begged him to forgive her. She said that she had realized she was still in love with him and couldn't stand watching him be happy with someone else. Jake told her that she had destroyed his family and his marriage and that he would never forgive her for what she had done. He said he was going to make sure everyone knew what kind of person she really was. He also told her that he was going to pursue full custody of Emma because he couldn't trust Melissa to put their daughter's well-being above her own selfish desires. He said he was going to tell Emma the truth about why her daddy and stepmom had separated. Melissa apparently completely lost it when Jake said this and started screaming that she had only done it because she loved him and that I had stolen him away from his real family and that she deserved another chance. Jake recorded part of this conversation on his phone and he sent it to me. Listening to Melissa admit that she had deliberately lied to break up our marriage was both vindicating and heartbreaking. On one hand, I felt vindicated because it proved that I had been right all along and that Melissa was exactly the manipulative psycho I had always known she was. But on the other hand, it was heartbreaking because it meant that my marriage had been destroyed by someone who was just jealous and selfish and couldn't stand to see Jake happy with someone else. Jake has been begging me to listen to the recording and to consider giving him another chance now that we know the full truth about what Melissa did and how she manipulated him. He's been saying that he was the victim of psychological manipulation and that he should have trusted me, but that he was being bombarded with lies and fake evidence, and that anyone would have been confused in his situation. Part of me feels bad for Jake because I can see now that Melissa's campaign against our marriage was much more sophisticated and deliberate than I originally realized, and that she really did put him in an impossible position. But the other part of me is still angry because regardless of how convincing Melissa was, Jake still chose to believe her over me and he still walked out on his family when things got difficult. I told Jake that knowing the full truth about Melissa's manipulation didn't change the fact that he had abandoned Oliver and me and that trust once broken is incredibly difficult to rebuild. I also told him that while I appreciated him finally standing up to Melissa and threatening to pursue custody of Emma, it was too little too late, and that he should have protected our family from her from the beginning. Jake has been sending me flowers and letters and even showed up at my work to beg me to give him another chance. But I told him that I needed time to process everything and figure out what was best for Oliver and me. The truth is I'm more confused now than I was before because part of me wants to believe that Jake was just a victim of Melissa's manipulation and that he deserves another chance. But another part of me thinks that a good husband and father should have been able to see through Melissa's lies and should have trusted his wife enough to not abandon his family based on the word of a bitter ex. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I do know that Melissa's confession has changed the dynamics of everything. I'm going to have to decide whether Jake's betrayal was forgivable given the circumstances or whether some lines once crossed can never be uncrossed. Final update. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to give everyone closure on this crazy situation because so many of you have been following this story and asking for updates. After Melissa confessed to Jake that she had made up the whole paternity scandal to try to win him back, I spent weeks going back and forth about whether to give him another chance. I talked to therapists and friends and family and basically anyone who would listen. The turning point came when I realized that while Jake may have been manipulated by Melissa, he still made the choice to abandon his family. That choice revealed something fundamental about his character that I couldn't ignore. I kept thinking about those 2 weeks when Oliver and I were alone while Jake stayed at his friend's house and how scared and confused I had been. How Oliver kept looking around for his daddy. I realized that I could never put my son through that kind of uncertainty again. So I went through with the divorce and it was finalized 3 months ago. Jake has been absolutely devastated, but I think it was the right decision for Oliver and me. The custody arrangement has been interesting because Jake has been fighting for more time with Oliver and trying to prove that he's changed and that he'll never let Melissa manipulate him again. Jake did follow through on his threat to pursue full custody of Emma, and the court battle with Melissa has been absolutely brutal and has exposed just how unstable and manipulative she really is. During the custody hearings, Melissa's true character came out. The judge heard recordings of her admitting to lying about Oliver's paternity and saw evidence of her years-long campaign to sabotage Jake's relationships. The judge was not impressed with Melissa's behavior. Jake was granted primary custody of Emma with Melissa getting supervised visitation only. She has to attend therapy and parenting classes before she can have unsupervised time with her daughter. Emma has been living with Jake most of the time now, and she's actually been doing much better without her mother's constant manipulation and poisoning her against me and Oliver. Jake and I have developed a decent co-parenting relationship. He's been an amazing father to Oliver and has really stepped up to prove that he's learned from his mistakes. He's also been completely no contact with Melissa except for communications through lawyers about Emma. He's made it clear that he will never allow her to interfere in his life again. As for me, I've been focusing on building a new life for Oliver and myself, and I've actually started dating someone new who treats me with the respect and trust that I deserve. His name is David and he's a divorced father with a daughter of his own. He's shown me what it looks like when someone chooses to trust and support their partner instead of believing lies and abandoning ship when things get difficult. David knows the whole story about what happened with Jake and Melissa, and he's never once made me feel like I need to prove my loyalty or faithfulness. That's been incredibly healing after everything I went through. Jake has met David a few times during Oliver's pickup and drop-off, and while it's awkward, I can tell that Jake realizes what he lost and that David is everything Jake should have been but wasn't. I'm not going to lie and say that I don't sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had given Jake another chance, but I know in my heart that I made the right decision because Oliver deserves a stable home with people who will never doubt or abandon him. The most satisfying part of this whole ordeal has been watching Melissa face the consequences of her actions. Not only did she lose primary custody of Emma, but she also became a social pariah when word got out about what she had done. Jake made sure that everyone in their social circle knew exactly how Melissa had deliberately sabotaged our marriage with lies and how she had put Emma in the middle of her sick games. Melissa's own family was horrified when they found out the truth, and several of her relatives reached out to apologize to me for not seeing through her manipulation sooner. She ended up having to move to a different town because she couldn't handle the judgment and shame of everyone knowing what kind of person she really was. Jake tells me that she's been trying to contact him to apologize and beg for another chance, but he's blocked her on everything and refuses to engage with her manipulation anymore. Emma is in therapy to deal with the damage that Melissa's behavior caused, and she's been doing much better and has even started asking about Oliver and wanting to spend time with him. I've been allowing supervised visits between Emma and Oliver because they are siblings and Emma isn't responsible for her mother's actions. It's been healing to see Emma laugh and play without the weight of her mother's bitterness and manipulation dragging her down. As for Oliver, he's thriving and is such a happy, confident little boy who is surrounded by people who love him unconditionally and will never make him doubt his worth. He has a father who sees him regularly and loves him deeply, and a stepfather figure in David who treats him like his own son, and a big sister in Emma who adores him. Sometimes I look at my life now and I'm amazed at how much better everything turned out than I could have imagined when I was going through the worst of it. I learned that sometimes the worst things that happen to us end up being blessings in disguise because they force us to see people's true characters and make difficult decisions that ultimately lead us to better lives. Jake destroying our marriage by believing Melissa's lies was devastating at the time, but it also freed me to find someone who would never doubt me or abandon me when things got difficult. And Oliver gets to grow up seeing what healthy relationships look like instead of watching his parents navigate the toxic manipulation that Melissa brought into our lives. So while this whole experience was painful and traumatic, it also taught me that I'm stronger than I thought and that I deserve better than someone who would throw away his family based on lies. I hope this gives everyone closure on this crazy story and shows that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and building a better life without the people who tried to destroy you.